What will this lead to? To the dissolution of the Russian Federation. That's the only plan being carried out. Holy shit. You can see it. They occupied Rubliovka. Rubliovka occupied Moscow. Moscow occupied the rest of Russia, the metropolis, which needs to be shut down because all the other Russian republics, you could say, are slaves of Moscow or colonies of Moscow, like a metropolis. They'll just clap their hands if we take it out.
It just hit near that globe. It just struck somewhere over there. There's the missile. Insane.
That's why we need to focus on this. The main plan, if we consider a peaceful one, a peaceful plan for Europe, for Ukraine, is the dissolution of the Russian Federation. That's one point of a peace plan, the dissolution of the Russian Federation. So let's focus on that. It's easy to work on by destroying the Russian economy. That's exactly what our defense forces are doing now with the support of our partners, because right now, our partners, even the Americans, we've been allowed to strike Russian territory with ballistic cluster and long-range missiles. Well, that's it. All restrictions on targeting the Russian economy have been lifted. And now Europe will join in, providing a significant number of long-range strike systems to destroy that economy. What will this lead to? To the dissolution of the Russian Federation. They hit the station, damn it.
More are incoming. Yet another powerful explosion. More incoming projectiles are on their way. They're definitely not shooting back at us.
Already once? Oh, did it just go off now? There goes the black smoke. Yeah, really? I hear shelling. Oh, what is that? Who is that?
Yeah, it's flying.
Huh?
Yeah, it's flying. Trying to drop something.
Yeah? There, it's flying. What's that? Boom. That's it. Just like that. Just like that, for nothing. Somewhere else. Deep State reports that the Russian army has made significant advances in Pokrovsk, as well as progress near Vladimirovka, which is north of Mirnograd, and in Stepnogorsk, which is in the Zaporizhzhia direction. At the same time, in the area of Kupiansk, which Russia claims to have captured, no advance has been recorded. Roman Igorovich, let's start from the beginning. Pokrovsk direction, please. The floor is yours.
This is our main problem right now, which we also need to fight against. I mean, the lack of troop density on the southeastern front. In order to increase the density, especially with motivated and competent personnel, we need to accomplish two tasks. The first is to bring into power, this has already been discussed, to bring officers from the strategic reserve into the executive branch who will give the order to form up. All security forces, that is the armed forces of Ukraine, will be deployed on a rotational basis, definitely. About 30% of the entire law enforcement system of Ukraine's civil service, 30% will go to the military, and the remaining 2/3 will be preparing to join the military every 6 months. So this process needs to be set in motion, and that's when we'll end up with roughly 4 groups. So 1/3 of the law enforcement civil service and 1/4, or rather, of the overall group will make up the armed forces of Ukraine, rotating to the front every 6 months to carry out the combat mission of preserving sovereignty and restoring the territorial integrity of our state. This could set this cycle in motion. Only military personnel who know how to do this, who have been trained in academies, how to do this as part of the executive branch, carrying out certain tasks of state administration under the pressure of an external enemy. This mechanism exists. And what needs to be done, I have already explained countless times, even using my fingers to illustrate. But once again, only they can do this. I repeat, only officers, people with basic military education. Right now, near Pokrovsk, because the density is still insufficient, the Russians are trying to push us out of the Pokrovsk-Mirnograd agglomeration completely, including pushing us off the high ground. This is very dangerous for us. Why? Because if we leave the heights of Pokrovsk, Pokrovsk is currently a gray zone, and Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad, you could say, is a gray zone under dual control, mainly by long-range strike capabilities. There are some small tactical groups that infiltrate the urban area. On both sides, there is what you might call a patchwork front. But as for Pokrovsk and Mirnohrad themselves as a defensive line, we are holding them. The Russians are trying to push us out, but we are holding on, especially the high ground, for example, the same citadel in Pokrovsk. The situation there is quite good for holding our positions. The same goes for Krasnoarmeyska, the western part. That's the Pokrovska mine administration. Western Pokrovska, it's the same high ground, and we're holding it. Certain operations are currently being carried out from Dobropilya to suppress the Russians. Further actions are being taken to cut off northern Krishna. So there is positive momentum there, at least from the perspective of operational tactical actions on our side. In other words, the situation is more or less stabilized, at least for now, but to fully resolve it, the troops need to be reinforced with law enforcement agencies, security structures, or at least with servicemen from these security structures. The issue will be resolved regarding Pokrovsk. That is, Pokrovsk right now, I would say, is not even the main pressure point, considering the other directions as well.
Roman Egorovich Putin continues to play war games while everyone is discussing Trump's peace plan. The Kremlin's geostrategist decided to demonstrate that no methods. He is not at all interested in stopping the war. Putin once again dressed up in camouflage and staged a visit to one of the command posts of the West Group. Moreover, the posters on the walls of this command post turned out to be cobbled together from inserts from computer games, as journalists discovered. In these decorations reminiscent of a provincial house of culture, the war criminal once again, like a parrot, declares that the goals of the special military operation must be achieved. Meanwhile, Chief of the General Staff Gerasimov proudly boasts that the Russian army has supposedly captured Kupiansk. This is categorically denied by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine and even by Russian bloggers. Roman Egorovich, let's discuss this. So what is the situation in Kupiansk? This is very important.
Well, this is an information psychological special operation involving the top officials of the state. What are they trying to show? Full Russian control over Kupiansk would cut off the main logistical chain, the chain that leads to the left bank to our Kupiansk-Uzlovoy garrison. We have a fairly strong group there. The Russians can't break through it. They're trying to destroy Kupiansk-Uzlovoy roughly the same way they recently destroyed Kupiansk with airstrikes. But if they completely destroy Kupiansk-Uzlovoy, they lose it as a future station. So what is Kupiansk-Uzlovoy? It's south of Kupiansk on the left bank of the Oskil River. It's a major sorting station from which several railway lines branch out to Luhansk, Donetsk, and Kharkiv regions. They also come in from Valuiki, another military hub. That's why they want to capture Kupiansk-Uzlovoy, either not damaged at all or at least not heavily damaged. Because right now they've completely destroyed Kupiansk as a hub. It's basically wiped out, but they're still sparing Kupiansk-Uzlovoy for now. But in order to force our troops to withdraw from the left bank themselves, a serious information and psychological operation is being carried out, which Gerasimovs and Putins are spreading around, that they've supposedly taken all of Kupiansk and the left bank, that our garrison is allegedly in some kind of semi-encirclement pressed up against the Oskol. But actually, it's the Russians who have the problem there, not us. Why? Because the best positions there are occupied, good positions. It's a floodplain there after all. After all, it's the left bank and the Oskol. There are very few tank-accessible directions there. Almost everything there is mined, and quite good fortifications are covering Kupiansk-Uzlovoy. The Russians have already broken so many teeth there, you can't even count anymore. So although our general staff keeps count, every day more than 1,000 Russians are subtracted along the entire front line. That's why it's very important for them to create panic on the left bank. And now they're trying to create this panic through an information psychological special operation, claiming that the main logistics chain through Kupiansk has been cut. The Kupiansk logistics chain hasn't been cut, it's being held. Moreover, there's still a lot there. After all, the Oskil River is there now. They released water from the slippery waterway, so basically it's not a problem to cross it. As a water barrier, it's not an issue at all right now. Absolutely not. Specifically there at the Kupiansk junction. And Kupiansk is under the control of the Ukrainian army, at least from the perspective of FPV drones. That is, the situation there is quite favorable. The positions are good right now. Some of our unmanned systems units have already taken up positions there, and they report that they are controlling the situation in depth. A pretty good range, 15 to 20 kilometers. Sometimes they even fly in and hit targets, meaning they can reach up to 50 kilometers there. they are capable of carrying out these tasks. That's why the Russians have a problem there, and they can't do anything about it. Now they're spinning tales together with Putin and Gerasimov, telling stories about some kind of encirclement in that direction. They're the ones surrounded themselves. We have no encirclements anywhere at all. Right now, the Russians are being unraveled. We're breaking them up near Dobropilia, finishing off those pockets of encirclement, those fire traps they've gotten themselves into. It was specifically the Russian army that made a move on Dobropilia. Moreover, they've already removed the commander of the army that charged toward Dobropilia. The most interesting thing is they've pinned all the blame, so to speak, the dead dogs on him, even though it was Putin who gave the order for this military fiasco. That's why the military hate politicians.
Roman Nikolaevich, what's the situation in the more Polish direction? The Southern Defense Forces report that the situation in the Huliaipol direction is quite tense, but the armed forces of Ukraine are not surrounded by the Russians. Communication with the Ukrainian military is maintained, logistics are well organized, and the evacuation of the wounded is underway. What is the situation there? This is also a very important section of the front because we see that in the Zaporizhia region, Russia is trying to attack, and unfortunately, a number of settlements have been occupied over the past month. The floor is yours.
There is no encirclement anywhere along the entire front. Because these stories about encirclement are just that, fairy tales, something for Gerasimov to tell while sitting with Putin. But it is precisely in the Huliaipol direction that things are the hardest. It's not even as difficult in Pokrovsk or in the same Kupiansk. It's specifically in the Huliaipol direction. Why is it so difficult? We had to withdraw. Again, this was due to insufficient troop density in that area. We've said it 1 billion times. Put the security forces into action, reinforce the Eastern Front with a sufficient number of motivated, professionally capable fighters. Right now, only the security forces can do it. There are no other options. We have 500,000 of them. Just in the Ministry of Internal Affairs, there are 300,000. So the ability to put 100,000 on the line there and reinforce, say, the Southeast Front is definitely there. And until that's done, we'll just keep retreating. That's what it is. Why isn't there an encirclement? We're pulling back. Operational level commanders make the decision to withdraw as soon as any serious problem arises with encirclement. So that's basically why the Russians are advancing rather quickly, arguably, especially in the Gulipoli area. But it's not Gulipoli, it's the Zaporizhia direction to the right. They've reached the bypass road and are trying to get to the Donetsk-Zaporizhia road near Pokrovsky, which is north of Huliaipol. For some reason, they've started a sort of semi-encirclement of Huliaipol itself. But the situation is extremely difficult. We can't afford to leave Huliaipol. If we abandon Huliaipol, the Russians, basically then they'll be able to collapse the front, get into the rear, including Orikhiv, and we'll have to withdraw from there, and they'll approach Zaporizhia. They'll tear Zaporizhia apart with army artillery. That's why we absolutely cannot allow this. Right now, Huliaipol is like the keystone of the front, and it absolutely must be held. So, well, we'll see how our general staff handles this situation, of course, because additional forces and resources need to be urgently redirected there. To solve the staffing problem, we need to get more troops into action. The
US expects that Zelensky will sign the agreement. Vitkov and Kirill Dmitriev have a peace plan set for Thanksgiving, November 27th. Then the agreement will be presented in Moscow, and the process is expected to be completed by early December, according to the Financial Times. Elections could be held 100 days after the signing of the peace treaty and the ceasefire. Right now, Zelensky is preparing a plan to get out of the crisis and understands that quick decisions are needed. We'll discuss the peace talks, the Vitkov and Kirill Dmitriev plan, and the corruption scandal involving the well-known military analyst Roman Svitan. Roman Igorovich, welcome.
Thank you. I wish everyone good health.
Roman Igorovich, what do you think of the peace plan proposed by Vitkov, Kirill Dmitriev, and Trump regarding Ukraine and the deadline that Trump has set for Zelensky?
The whole issue is about timing. When all these plans, yet another, the 649th plan will come up. Dasha, how many times have we already discussed these plans with you? Plans that are mostly generated by people who are far removed from the real issues. So this plan, the one everyone is running around with now, which appeared out of nowhere, as they say, they're just trying to use it to overshadow Mindijgate. That is, all the participants in the process, Alibaba and these 40 Zakr men, Israeli bandits. They're really feeling the heat right now, seriously. Why? Because after electricity, that is, after nuclear energy, the next big corruption is in the Ministry of Defense. And there's corruption there, plus add a few more zeros to what they stole from Energoatom. Everyone understands this perfectly well, which is why all the participants in the process mostly have Israeli passports in their pockets. We all understand that all these Kushners, Vitkovs, Mindiches, Tsulukermans, and so on, and those who are still left here in Ukraine, either in power or close to it, they need to divert this flow of serious problems related to corruption. Let me repeat once again the next step. It's corruption in the Ministry of Defense. And it's not just Ukrainian money. The Ministry of Defense also received American and European funds, both from the G7 and the G20. So everyone understands perfectly well that the money was not theirs. Naturally, it was under a certain level of oversight in order to divert attention in the media. This extremely serious negative issue. And they pulled out, so to speak, from deep down in the basement. I'll put it mildly, not in military terms. If I was speaking in military terms, I'd say it differently. They pulled out these several dozen points which don't fit together at all. Absolutely. There's no point in going through all 28 points if the first one is about Ukraine's sovereignty, confirming Ukraine's sovereignty. The remaining 27 points contradict Ukraine's sovereignty. That's all there is to it. So it's just a jumbled mess, some nonsense that now gives the participants in the process something to fight over. Well, it's like back in the day. Remember Don Quixote and Sancho Panza? Guess who is Don Quixote and who is Sancho Panza? I'll give you 2 tries. They fought against windmills. I mean, they made up their own windmill. That is a dragon. A windmill, as if it were a dragon. And they fought against it. And they wanted to drag everyone in to show what great dragon slayers they are. Dragons. They defeated the windmill. So why are they showing all this? So that later they can grab Dulcinea del Toboso by her private parts with gusto. What else would it be for? So it's the same picture here. They're trying to cover up Mingichgay, a very serious problem. The Ukrainian one, a very serious one. External control, Israeli citizens who are running Ukraine, or at least trying to manage the financial flows there, some decision making. This is external control. This is a loss of sovereignty. A complete lack of work by our intelligence services. Main Intelligence Directorate, Security Service, Foreign Intelligence Service, State Bureau of Investigation, NABU. And all the other agencies, of which there are a ton, but they're completely useless. They missed the activities of Minyech, a citizen from the Israeli underworld, who was directly siphoning money from every Ukrainian. What was the interesting scheme? There was one, Minyech's. And these 40 bandits, together with Alibaba, and of course the Israelis, got into every Ukrainian's pocket. First, he raised the price of electricity. We paid for this electricity at a price 2 or even 3 times higher than the cost of nuclear power generation. That is, we paid 3 to 4 times the price for various items, and industry paid as much as 10 cents. They paid. And they got into every Ukrainian's pocket. They stole this money and ran off to Israel with it. Roughly speaking, they brought it to Netanyahu as a stash. Well, that's how it looks now. Naturally, all this Israeli riffraff is now trying to somehow cover up this whole thing, telling fairy tales about how someone is supposedly going to betray us and force us, say, into capitulation. Once again, fighting windmills. Again, Sancho Panza and Don Quixote, something like that. How should Ukraine approach this? Understanding where this is coming from, we must definitely clamp down on these corrupt officials, force our anti-corruption agencies to root out everyone and anyone. Make counterintelligence start working. There are still those 40 supermen left in Ukraine. And Alibaba is still here, and those 40 bandits, the Zuckermans, are still here too. They need to be pulled out. They need to be arrested. They need to be deported if it comes to that, when it becomes clear that there is direct external Israeli control here at the very least. And then there will be an attempt by this whole rabble to push us toward capitulation. Capitulation through some contrived plan. I've already talked about it. That is, the points of this plan are completely inconsistent with each other. First, we support Ukraine's sovereignty and then give up Crimea, Donbas, and Russia. Something like that. And let's lift the sanctions from it too. Where did this even come from? This is the main foundation of these points, the so-called Istanbul agreements that were brought to us. And a couple of well-known Israelis in 2022 in Istanbul, namely Abramovich and Bennett, the Prime Minister of Israel. So this sweet pair was pushing exactly the same Crimea. Donbas was given to Russia, forgotten, and so on and so forth. Plus, moreover, Donbas in its entirety just like now, the exact same situation. The Russians also drew in a land corridor, so most likely they tacked on a few more billion in greenbacks somewhere, handed it over to someone. That's what they call it. That's why this is exactly how it should be treated. At this point, we shouldn't pay any attention to this topic at all. We need to go back and bring it back to the surface. Specifically, the issues related to corruption among these 40 bandits under the leadership of Ali Baba. And then work on this issue. That is, put pressure on them, squeeze them out. And squeeze out both the executive branch, and together with the executive branch, we have already repeatedly, the thing is, Mindich is for us one of those so-called signals, so to speak. How many times have we talked about the need to completely relaunch the executive branch, including, whether it's me or the 40 bandits, this entire chancellery, and of course the cabinet of ministers. All these Shmihal people should have been sent to the front a long time ago. And the cabinet of ministers, the executive branch, should be filled with military personnel. Why do I say military personnel? Few people know this, and the politicians who jumped straight from the stage into positions of power have no idea about it at all. They don't have a clue about the armed forces of Ukraine. There is such a concept as OSR, Officer of the Strategic Reserve of the Cabinet of Ministers. After graduating from the General Staff Academy, every officer who goes through it, they all go through it there. They receive training in state governance. During hostilities, during wartime, they undergo special training. Colonels, generals, and that's why they fall into this category. OSR, Officer of the Strategic Reserve of the Cabinet of Ministers, who are supposed to be brought into the executive branch immediately after the start of an external invasion, or maybe even before that happens. So what needs to be done is, we need to kick the executive branch out of there, remove the civilians, bring in OSR, Officers of the Strategic Reserve. We have thousands of them. Thousands of strategic reserve officers who have been trained in public administration under difficult conditions. They know how to govern the state. Not these weirdos, all this Israeli riffraff, green oddballs, but actual colonels and generals who know how to steer the situation right now. That's what needs to be done right now. That's right. There are some good initiatives in the Verkhovna Rada right now about expressing no confidence in the cabinet of ministers, dismissing them, and within 24 hours, bringing the strategic reserve officers into the cabinet of ministers and the executive branch, including the same chancellery. Because Ali Baba and his 40 Zuckermans or Mindiches have absolutely no business being there, because this is the Ukrainian state, after all. People with Israeli passports should not be sitting there.
Roman Yegorovich, what are they writing about this peace plan? Witkova. There is a department, and already all the reputable Western media have written about the territorial issues. Ukraine must withdraw its troops from the part of Donetsk region it currently controls. This territory will become a neutral, demilitarized buffer zone, internationally recognized as Russian territory, but there will be no Russian troops stationed there. Next, Crimea, Donetsk, and Luhansk regions will be de facto recognized as Russian, including by the United States. Next, in the Kherson and Zaporizhzhia regions, the front line will be frozen. Russia will relinquish the territories it controls outside of these 5 regions. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant will be put into operation under IAEA supervision. Electricity will be supplied equally 50-50 to Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine and Russia will commit not to change the agreements by force. Russia will legally enshrine a policy of non-aggression towards Ukraine and Europe. Let's discuss these details of the Witkov plan, as I understand it, from the Kremlin and Kirill Dmitriev.
Let's look at these plans again from above, from the side, and from the perspective of the Criminal Code of Ukraine. The point is, the analysis of these plans and the accompanying information, calls of any kind or level, fall under Article 110 of the Criminal Code of the Republic. Ukraine, we have a very serious article like that. It's about calls for the loss of sovereignty and our territorial integrity. Calls are one thing, but actions, if, God forbid, any official signs something or makes any progress on this case at all, that falls under Article 111 of the Criminal Code. And that's already considered high treason. And there, especially under Part 3, the penalty can be full confiscation of property up to life imprisonment. So there's no point in even discussing all this. I'll go even further. It's not just about discussing it. It's dangerous from the standpoint of prosecution under Ukrainian constitutional law and the Ukrainian criminal code. Let's not even talk about all this nonsense at all, because it directly involves the loss of sovereignty and defense capability. The territorial integrity of our state is covered by Article 110, and actions fall under Article 111. Just so you know, and journalists need to be told this as well. In other words, there's no need to throw this discussion and agitation into the information space. No one is going to go for that. And those who will, they know where to go. Suitcase train station IDF or suitcase train station Russia. Well, Yanukovych was raising the very same issues back in 2014. Questions like, where is Yanukovych breaking bread in Barvika, in the Moscow suburbs? These people will be breaking bread with those they ran away with. Mengic demonstrated this perfectly, somewhere near the Wailing Wall. Well, where else would they run with their Israeli passports? So there's no point in discussing all this. There won't be consequences for everything. It's just pure fantasy. And to talk just to cover up the real corruption within our government, well, there's no point, because after all, we're not working for corruption. On the contrary, we should be rooting out corruption with a red-hot iron. And during military operations, during war, corrupt officials must either be put up against the wall, well, only it is necessary naturally to introduce the death penalty for corruption and equate it with looting. And this is in its purest form. Marauding, who is Minik? This is a marauder, a real marauder. And all these 40 Zuckerbergs together with Alibaba, they are marauders who during the war are just blatantly stealing money. Money that our partners give us, that they give us for fighting the Russians, for restoring sovereignty and territorial integrity. That's why marauders should either be put up against the wall, or if they have Ukrainian passports, let's say some of them do, then they should be sent to a penal battalion along with everyone involved in all these schemes. To the penal battalion, demoted. If there are any officers among them, by the way, even from counterintelligence or intelligence, who are now for some reason failed to fulfill their main duty, didn't stop external control from being imposed on our state, they should be demoted to privates. Since we don't have execution by firing squad, demote them to privates and send them to a penal battalion. And send them to the front lines, for example, in Hulyapol or say in Pokrovsk. Let them wash away their guilt with blood. How else? Otherwise, it would be execution by firing squad. But for now, that mechanism hasn't been put in place. So there's no point. I'll say it again. I'm trying to go through all the points of this so-called Trump capitulation plan, except for the first one. The first point is maintaining sovereignty. But even so, there's no point in discussing it either, since it's already enshrined in our constitution. We don't need to confirm our sovereignty, nor does anyone else need to confirm it for us. Why? It's enshrined in our constitution, and it's affirmed by the Charter of the United Nations, which includes almost 200 countries. Why would we need to confirm it? It's already confirmed by default. So this whole plan is just, once again, I'll repeat, it's that formidable dragon, that imposing windmill, which we are now unfortunately being compelled and forced to bravely fight against with all our might and determination. All these Sancho Panzas, all these Don Quixotes, all these Alibabas and their 40 bandit minions. Well, that's more or less how I see it all.
Friends, please like this video and write a few kind words in support of Ukraine in the comments. Roman Legushi and I always discuss current military and political topics. It's been a tough week, and it's very important that we speak honestly about the situation both at the front and in politics. The well-known military analyst Roman Svitan. Roman Legushi, thank you, and as always, see you next time.
Goodbye.